my name is Valerie Fuqua. I am on Facebook as Valerie Fuqua. That's F as in Frank, UQUA, because it's French and they moved to America and forgot how to spell. But anyways, uh, I have an author page and an artist page. I actually did paint that. I also have a couple YouTube pages. My name again, Valerie Fuqua, and also the other one is Psychic Kitty because I do actually have a lot of unusual paranormal experiences. Just had to spend an hour awake in the middle of the night this morning because of one. I hate it when people just start talking to me that are not there. um,
So,
Go ahead.
so do me a favor. So I know that you mentioned to me that you had some issues with your body image and how maybe the world saw you and how maybe you saw yourself. So take us through
Mhm.
the beginning. Which one happened first? Was it how you viewed yourself or was it how others viewed you?
So I started off as a tomboy. I always felt I had more in common with guys than girls. I didn't really get girls. They seemed kind of obsessed with things that made absolutely no difference. And, they would be talking about playing house and, taking care of a baby. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. I want to go play in the grass and roll down the hill. So I play with the boys in the area until, of course, we started getting close toward the end of elementary school, and all of a sudden, it's like I had cooties, and they all flocked away from me, and I had to somehow figure out how to interface with girls. But uh, I just never really understood the obsession with clothes or with dressing well. It just didn't make any sense to me. Clothes were clothes. And if it looked passable, I was going to wear it. And I was mostly concerned about function. So I wore a lot of shorts and a lot of shirts, and it was just one layer, and that was about it. Because any more than that, it was too much for me. I'd get overheated, and blah blah blah. And I just never really understood why one would care more than just covering themselves. And it was not until I got into high school that I really realized what the real difference is. I think part of it is because I grew up poor. And so most of the clothes that I got were hand me down. And it may have actually passed through like multiple hands before it actually got to me. I mean, I wore stuff that probably hadn't actually been manufactured since the 80s. And that was when I was born. But I mean, that's what I had at the time. But then in high school, I had access to a little bit more money because my mom was actually doing better. And I suddenly realized, hey, I've seen some really fantastic looking women who dress for their body shape, who have these very beautiful, clean lines and the ruffles, and it just accentuates their body until they look so statuesque. It's like somebody just chiseled them out of stone. And I was like, you know what? I could just dress myself like I'm an art project. And it just completely changed my thinking. It wasn't about being girly anymore. Now it was about being a good artist. And so I completely changed my image, and I started buying clothes that accentuated what I had to work with, which, because of the 2 years of steroids, so that I didn't die from ITP in high school, I had kind of a significant body at the time. Yeah, so I was able to take what I had to work with and completely change it around so that now I actually felt attractive. And to people who weren't obsessed with specific body types, I probably looked attractive too.
I know for me in high school, my struggle was the other way in high school. I was probably like 100 pounds.
Oh,
In
wow.
high school, yes. If there was a strong breeze, I would end up with in Kansas with Dorothy and Tin Man
Mhm.
and all of them, right?
You wore the big
My
shirts,
issue,
didn't you? The oversized shirt.
no, no, you know what? I was poor
Ooh.
like you, right? So
No, no,
I
no. I mean,
had
I had a friend who was like that, and she wore a really big t-shirt to try and hide it.
no, I wish. What I did was I had clothes similar to you where it was passed down. So they were a little bit bigger, but they weren't large to hide it, right? So what I did is I wanted to
Mhm.
understand how I was being viewed. And a lot of people would look at me as, okay, we know he's poor. He probably doesn't have food, probably doesn't have money. So that's why I looked the way I did and I weighed the way I did. And it opened me up to a lot of criticism and a lot of name calling and what we would call
Mhm.
today bullying. But back then, I didn't really look at it that way. But in hindsight, it definitely was. So that's
Yeah.
why when I asked you how you felt, I know how I felt struggling the other way, right?
Oh,
And
yes.
then for you, like, as you got throughout high school and then you started entering adulthood, how was your view of yourself at that point?
I was always bullied. I definitely was always bullied throughout my life. Even before I had the weight, I was still bullied. I'm actually autistic. And so a lot of people had noticed that I was different from everybody else. And of course, that makes people uncomfortable. And so, of course, they have to make that my problem. And they have to tease me about it, or they have to tease me about something else that they have invented that is bothering them. But being autistic, I was also very insulated from the world around me, and I was mostly living up here instead of out here in the real world with everyone else. So I didn't quite react the same as most people do to bullying. I was still able to go by my own guiding star a lot of the time, which was I'm actually special and I'm here to do important things. And I just have to find what my greatness is, and then I'll be able to do them. And so, although, yes, it made me feel bad, and yes, I had a lot of trouble trying to interact with people, and it definitely traumatized me. I didn't end up with the major, suicidal, I shouldn't even be here. I should kill myself kind of tendencies that somebody in my position probably would have had. Because I mean, I did get bullied pretty hard now that I think about it. I remember there was this one guy who would insist on threatening me with the casts that he was inevitably sporting throughout high school. And now that I think about it, he probably was getting bullied at home by some adult who was tossing him down the stairs or whatever. Because seriously, every time he got a cast off, he'd end up with another one on just a few months later.
I always
And
say, like if you look at it, people who get bullied, there's something happening at home,
mm-hmm, yeah,
right?
yeah, people who bully, they're usually bullied by somebody else and they're just passing the pain along. They feel small and weak, and they feel better if they transition to the place of power where they're now bullying someone else and make someone else feel small and weak. And I actually, in high school, I used psychology to defeat all my bullies.
Ooh, share that tip with me, please.
Right now, I do not recommend doing this because, it's a reverse bullying situation again, which is not a good thing. However, I did discover that every single bully got something different from bullying me. And if I not only took that away, but took away more from them having bullied me, now suddenly they didn't want to do that anymore. So, um, let's see. I'm trying to remember. Okay, I'm just going to start with the last one. The last one that was really, really difficult was the guy with the cast. I had a really tough time pinning down what it was that he was getting out of things because I tried everything I could think of that was working for the other bullies, and none of it made an impact. As it turns out, what it was he wanted to see someone else more scared than he felt. So what I did was when he was bullying me and I was having a lot of trouble, we were stuck in this little area. It was the fenced in area of the pool at school. And so there was really nowhere I could go. There were two sets of bleachers, and he insisted on making the entire bleachers bounce, which was really annoying for me. And he kept following me from one set to the other. And one of them was in the sun, which I hate the sun. And the other one was in the shade, which was much better for me. And I started off in the shade. I went to the sun. He followed me there. I go back to the shade. I have had it with this jerk. I'm just done. So I finally decide to give it a try and see what happens. And so I take my acting skills and I remember all of the times I've ever been mad. And I just build up all of that rage and I just take that emotion and I throw it at him. You should have seen the look on his face. I mean, it was the money shot. He was like, and he ran. And he went to the other set of bleachers in the sun and he sat there quietly for the rest of that hour-long block of school. And then I didn't see him for 2 weeks, except in class. And he stayed on the other side of our entire class the entire time.
If I
He
may
tried
share,
one time
yeah.
to make fun of me, and I walked right up to him and I said that, oh, um, uh, listen, yeah, he had said something mean to me, and I said, all I see is a mirror, basically saying that that's him, not me. And that was it. He never talked to me again. He never threatened me again. He never did anything again. My friend Claire, she was just awestruck. She was like, how did you do that? Apparently, she'd seen how scary this guy could be.
If I may interrupt and share a similar story that I had, have you ever seen the movie Django Unchained?
I haven't. No, tell me about it.
Yeah, so it's a movie where a young man is captured and he's put into servitude and he's a slave, right? And so it's that type
Mhm.
of era. But at the end of the movie, he gets his revenge on all those people who's enslaved him, who's beaten him, who's taken advantage of him. I was that person back in high school. Everyone that bullied me, as soon as I got bigger, I got stronger and I became a better person, more confident. That's what I did. I started to have my comeuppance on each and every one of them. So not necessarily physically, right? It was just that I made sure that I was in a better space, right?
Mhm.
Emotionally and mentally. And that's how I got my quote unquote revenge. Because similar to you, there's times where it can be very difficult because we're so young and we're not as prepared back then as maybe we would have been today if we were going through it. And I think that's the struggle for a lot of kids
Mhm.
because when you get high school, our bodies are changing, our
Mhm.
social interactions are changing. There's all these things that are going on. So for you, um, I know we spoke about this earlier in the green room. When you look back on what you
Mhm.
went through, how do you feel knowing that you've been able to overcome all of that and live a successful life?
Well, I'm glad that I was able to, stop all of the bullying so that I was able to get through the rest of high school and make more improvements on who I was because it was hard to do that while I was being bullied. I still don't think that was the best way to have done it. There should have been a better way, but I couldn't think of it at the time. The thing I do want to stress though, the very important part and the thing that differentiates me from the bullies that I defeated is that the second they left me alone, I knew it was very important. Now I stop and I leave them alone. We are at a ceasefire and we have to enforce that ceasefire. If they come and attack me, okay, I got to defend myself. But the second they stop coming at me, that's it. Arms down. Otherwise, now you're the bully and you're the person that somebody else needs to be defeating, and you're the bad guy. And I never, ever, ever wanted to be the bad guy. That was
Was that
very
hard? Was
important
that
to
hard
me
for you?
when I was six
Was,
years
was that
old.
yeah? What was that hard for you to not do unto others which they did to you?
I definitely have struggled with the whole justice thing. I have those impulses of, you know, die, enemy, die, you know. But I also understand that when you do it back, you create victims. And do you really want to make somebody else feel the way you felt? You didn't want to. You didn't have to. You shouldn't have felt that way. It was a horrible thing to do. So why would you want to do it to somebody else? And so I did my best to work as hard as I could to ensure that I wasn't crossing that line. I still feel now that I'm older that I probably did cross that line, but not as bad as I could have. So at least there's that. And I just kind of have to leave the past in the past. I know better now. Now I have better tools for dealing with things. Instead of doing it back to them, now I ignore them, or I use a little bit of wordplay to make them sound like an idiot.
I know, like when I look at the stats and the numbers and all the people who struggle with bullying, like it's taken on a different form now, right? Like you have bullying everywhere. You have it online, you have
Oh,
it
yeah.
at the grocery store, at church, wherever it is, you can have a
Mm-hmm.
conversation with someone, you could be bullied. And I can understand why some people find it difficult not to retaliate in the way that they're being mistreated. But one thing, and we look like we're around the same age, and maybe you heard this as well. It seems when I entered college and university, and I had conversations with people who are now in their 20s and their early 20s, right? It
Mm-hmm.
seemed like to a lot of people, bullying was like a rite of passage, whereas everyone has to go through with it, everyone has to accept it, and you just suck it up and you move on.
That's a
But that
lie.
wasn't the case. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
That's a lie that was invented by fraternities to justify torturing pledges. Okay? Seriously, it's not real. Nobody has to suffer. Nobody has to achieve that, oh, I have survived this and now it's a badge of honor. No, you're very impressive if you're able to go through all those slings and arrows and not feel like you're going to die. But not everybody is like that. Some people are all soft and squishy on the inside, and being a marshmallow is not a bad thing. Okay? Marshmallows are great people to fall in love with. Seriously, because they have these open hearts that they will share with you instantly and completely. I mean, I'm one of those hard shell kind of people. I'm basically a gobstopper here. All right. It will take you forever to get through all my layers if you can even reach the center. And you will break your teeth trying to get through faster. But I've learned that being a marshmallow is it's actually so much better because you have deeper, fuller relationships. You're able to experience a full range of human emotion as opposed to my truncated version. And it's harder to get through this life that way, but it's better. I mean, it reminds me of flowers, flowering plants. Did you know that the only real difference between a weed and a flower is how we think of it? And most of the things that we deem weeds are only weeds because their flowers aren't pretty enough for us, because they are simpler plants whose focus is more on survival than beauty.
That's a good analogy to use
Mm-hmm.
because it goes back to the perspective and it ties in to the body image. Like when you stand in front of a
Yes.
mirror, do you see someone that you love and someone that is worthy of love, or do you see someone that you don't necessarily like and you believe
Mm-hmm.
that they're not worthy of love? And if I take it away from body image, like the physical. You can look in the
Mhm.
mirror and be slim, right? But you see things about yourself that you don't like because your personality maybe is not attractive to you. So therefore, you know it's not going to
Mhm.
be attractive to other people. So
Mhm.
as you were going through all this and you found success, one thing you mentioned that I want to touch on is you mentioned that there was pillars for you to that helped you overcome and to move forward. What are some of the pillars that you used and that was successful for you?
I actually don't quite remember the pillars conversation. Could you remind me a little bit more of that?
Absolutely. So what I'll do is I'll give an example of my pillars, right? So my pillars
Mhm.
were I had to overcome not only being 100 pounds, but I also
Mhm.
felt that I was unworthy because of my family's financial situation. So one of the pillars was I wanted to be successful in my eyes. I wanted to be happy. And one of the ways I found being happy was I wanted to make sure that I was in a position to be not only I view myself in a healthy way, but others
Mhm.
can view me in a healthy way as well. So I worked on my body. I worked on not only the outside, but I worked on the inside as well. I worked on my emotions. I understood myself. Was that some of the work
Mhm.
that maybe that you did to help you along?
Okay, I still don't remember the conversation, probably COVID brain, but I can tell you that I definitely worked on my body image. I actually did a lot of self-esteem work when I was in high school and also after high school, where I basically took all of those bad things that I would hear in my mind about, you're fat, you're ugly, you're out of shape, you've got all these, um, scars all over the place, blah, blah, blah. Why would anyone like that? And I went, wait a second, this is made up and untrue. I mean, seriously, there's a reason why the word chubby chaser exists. Okay. Just because you are overweight does not mean you're not attractive. Okay. So all of this stuff is a lie and completely made up. And if that is untrue, then I need to start looking at what is true. And so I would look back at all of my experience and go, so what really is true? And I would start telling myself this stuff over and over and over again. It was usually the opposite of whatever I was hearing in my head. And anytime I would hear something, I would say the opposite in my head over and over and over again because the way it got in there was indoctrination. You heard it enough that it sounded like the truth, even though you knew it was stupid. And so I reverse indoctrinated. I said the truth over and over until it became the truth. Even though it was actually right. That's how you get it in there by sending it in over and over and over again over the other thing. And I actually do have to get back to doing that again because I've noticed that my self-esteem has kind of come down over the last 20 years. But yeah, I haven't exactly had time to really devote to this. I was spending a lot of time in my head, so I had plenty of time to do this the first time. Not so much now. I've got too much life going on.
Do you believe that it's easier for you to go back to that place in your mind and exist instead of maybe existing out here in the world that can be harsh and cold at times?
Well, yeah, that's autism in a nutshell. You live in your head and not in reality. You commute to reality.
What are some of the ways that you would commute to reality?
So, in order for me to really talk to a person, I have to actually be in my mind, in my mental world, and I have to really think without external stimulus distracting me about what the conversation is, what I want to say, and how that will have an effect on the people who are listening. If I'm trying to do stuff in the moment and I have constant external distractions going on, I can't use those facilities. And so I end up with a whole lot of issues going on where people are getting mad. They're hearing all of this extra subtext that Other people might have intended. I didn't. It never even occurred to me. But that's how autism is. If you're out in reality, you can't bring all your tools with you. You commute. So it's whatever you're able to bring with you, which is usually much less than what you have at home. And so you usually have a great plan in your head, and then you try to take everything with you that you're going to need. And then you come to reality, and all of a sudden, it is basically the camping trip from hell. I mean, you didn't bring any food with you because you figured you were going to fish, but there are no fish biting, and also you couldn't find any worms. And now there's uh, rain coming, so you can't start the fire that you thought was going to protect you from the bears, and you swear that you could hear them moving around in the bushes. And the tent, it has these nice clear instructions, and then you try to build the tent and it is just poles everywhere, and you don't know how they managed to get through the tent canvas, but now it's pierced, and it just won't stand up, and then one of the poles just flips into the woods. You can't even find it anymore. It's like that. You think you have this plan, and then you try to enact it, and it all goes to hell because completely unexpected things happen, and you have no faculties for dealing with it in the moment because you didn't bring it with you. You couldn't. It's not like you can stuff your whole house in the car.
I wonder if I went through something like that, because there's times where I would create elaborate stories and situations in my mind. Like at one point, I was a superhero. Another point, I was whatever the case is, right? And because I was so heavy in reading books during that time as I was coming out of high school and a lot of difficulty that I had, my mind was working in different but very creative ways. And I would come
Mhm.
up with so many beautiful stories, or I would read something and inject myself in one of the characters, right? I would say, okay, this reminds me
Mhm.
of what I'm going through. So instead of it being, let's say, Bartholomew of wherever, right? It was terrain of that town, right? And I began to
Mhm.
latch on to characters. Does that sound like one of the ways that maybe we would commute to reality?
Um, I'm not entirely sure exactly. It sounds like you're describing something a little bit different. Are you talking about just that you would live in those worlds, or are you talking about that you would try to bring lessons from those worlds into your reality and they didn't work out so well?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think it was a little bit of both, but the lessons
Okay, so
did
that
work.
second thing is what I'm talking about a little bit. I mean, it's kind of related to what I'm talking about with commuting to reality. But I've noticed that NTs, neurotypicals, that would be the people who don't have autism for the most part, they usually would commute to their imaginary worlds. So you would find that a person who is neurotypical, their imaginary world isn't usually as vivid to them as their real world. Whereas with somebody who has autism, the imaginary world is more real. So the relationships created with those people that they have made up in their minds feel more real than the relationships created with the people here. And that may be an extra dimension that didn't quite happen in what you were experiencing, but in a lot of other ways, I'm sure it was very similar.
I will agree. I think it's one of the ways that maybe many of us decide to resolve something that we maybe can't resolve right then and there, but we have a
Mm-hmm.
way to cope, which gets us to resolving it. So for you, Valerie, for my
Mm-hmm.
audience, what's as we close, what's some advice that you want to give to them to make sure that they're not beating themselves up from a self-esteem standpoint when it comes to their body image?
Well, I would like to bring to everybody's attention the fact that it's actually a common issue in the world of supermodels. the people that you all think that you should be, that seem absolutely perfect in every way, that everybody wishes they were. Uh-huh. Yeah, it's a big thing in the world of supermodels that they have major self-esteem issues worse than anything us normal people could imagine. I mean, they see every single little line on their face, and oh my God, I'm 27. I'm past my expiration date. I am old. you know, and they eat an extra egg at breakfast, and now they got to hurl because they may go up a size from 0 to 1. I mean, seriously. So whatever your issues are, it doesn't matter, because if the perfect people are more messed up than you are, you can still love yourself and be worth something anyway. It's all imaginary. There is no real perfect. There's just what you wish, but it's not nearly as shiny and bright as you think it is.